Hello. Someone's trying to steal the show, as always. Hello, my dears. My name is Mariana, and welcome to my channel. We are on a Jungian kick. So my last few videos have been about depth psychology and 5 Jungian tarot books, and now we're going to talk about something that's a little bit more serious and something that really annoys me. So I cannot tell you how often I get asked about Jungian archetypes. People are so incredibly fascinated by archetypes, but also so frustrated because there is so little reliable information out there. And I cannot tell you how often people ask me questions about which archetype they are. This is impossible. And I'm going to say this again, this is impossible. You cannot be one archetype. That is antithetical to the very definition of what archetypes are. And so today I want to do a little bit of clarifying. We are going to talk about some Jungian archetypes, but we're going to talk about them as Jung talked about them. And so before we jump into it, make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure that you follow me on Instagram. And if you haven't signed up for the Jung for Witches seminar series, that's a thing to check out. This series is all about diving into the Jungian principles in a way that you can finally understand. I know how dense and complicated Jungian theory can be, but also how exciting it is. And so I've compiled this seminar series of 3 different installments, talking about everything from tarot to astrology to divination to parapsychology to synchronicity to feminist spirituality. It is the whole gambit. And if all of this stuff lights you up, gets you really excited, this is a must attend. And don't worry if you can't attend live or you just missed it, it is still available to purchase on my site, so go check that out in the description, and I will see you there. So let's talk about what everyone gets wrong about Jungian archetypes. I'm gonna sound like a snob today, and I might actually be one. That's entirely possible. But trust me, within the Jungian community, I am like the least snobby of the snobs. And that's not to say anything bad about my fellow Jungians. Like, yeah, we're in it, we know. But the thing is, like, there's a lot of people out there who think that Jung's theory should be really kept pure, and the world just wants to corrupt them so bad. So you may have seen something like this out there on the internet, something about the 8, the 12, the 16 Jungian archetypes. This is false, this is not real, this is nothing that Jung ever said. In my research, I have kind of found a few places where this information might have gotten started. There's some books by Caroline Myss and Carol Pearson, each who have done a lot of research on Jungian archetypes, have some very interesting things to say, and great books, totally go read them. But it's their take on archetypes and not Jung's take on archetypes, which does not mean they're wrong. It just means it's not Jungian, and it makes a difference because Jung is sort of the forefather of how we conceive and think about archetypes. And so when we want to really get to the foundations of it and really understand it at its essence, we kind of have to push away new, updated theories that are theories. And again, that's not to say that Jung is the god of archetypes and he's the only one who knew what's what. That's not true. But he really was trying to figure out what archetypes were rather than figuring out all their complexities and all the different types there are and all the different names. That really wasn't his thing. And so I may have gotten a little ahead of myself. If you don't know what archetypes are, not sure why you've watched this video this long, but I have another video for you. Don't you worry. Go ahead, click that up there, watch the video on archetypes, get your foundations, and then pop back over here. Essentially, archetypes are what Jung called primordial images. They are the containers of human experience that live in our blood, that have existed through the consciousness of every human that has ever lived in all of time. It doesn't matter where you're from, when you're from, archetypes are universal. They like to crouch here because the heat is right behind the couch, and then they just are trying to roast themselves alive, I'm pretty sure. They're at least 120 degrees. I do not know what is wrong with cats. Though I did recently watch a YouTube video that told me cats like to be 20 degrees warmer than people overall. So people like a cozy 72, so I guess what's real comfy for a cat is 92 degrees, which is insane. So when we Google Jungian archetypes and we get those 8, 12, 16 pie charts that say things like the caregiver, the artist, the rebel. These maybe are expressions of archetypal energies, but they're not what Jung considered the primordial images, the essential archetypes themselves. And so I'm going to outline the 5 main archetypes that Jung outlined as being the very basis of archetypal theory. So the first one we're going to talk about is the one that everybody knows already, and that's the shadow. Now, there's a pretty big misconception out there that the shadow means everything that's bad in us, but really it means everything that is unintegrated in us. It's everything that we've repressed or that we've not become conscious of. And this could be just as much good, brilliant, beautiful things about us as negative, dark, and not so nice. There are many of us out there who cannot actually see our own talents and skills because they are so pushed away into the shadow because of whatever other traumas we've experienced in life. And so that's just as much what we're trying to integrate as the really, really negative stuff that we are always trying to deny exists. And so we can't talk about the shadow without talking about shadow work, right? Shadow work. In the little witchy Jungian community that I'm a part of, this is our most hated topic. The thing about shadow work is it's really hard. When we see people doing shadow work and all they do is take out a journal and write down their fears and say, I faced them, that was some really nice inner development work. It wasn't shadow work. By definition, the shadow is unknown to us. We literally cannot see it. It's our shadow. So doing real shadow work means slowly facing the stuff that is in our periphery, that is just kind of over there somewhere, and we're afraid to look, and we're going to anyway. These are our deep traumas, our dark, heavy complexes, our essential primal fears. And so to do shadow work can sometimes be utterly overwhelming and really dangerous. I personally do not attempt shadow work outside of my container of therapy or outside of my readings. I think to constantly be trying to throw my own shadow in my face is to live a life of pretty much constant fear, and no one should live like that. So I really recommend watch this video that I did on shadow work, get a sense of how to do it safely so that you don't put yourself and your mental health at risk, and be slow, be tender with yourself. We are meant to meet our shadows. We are meant to integrate them and bring them into the whole of who we are. But this is a lifetime of work, and it is something that really cannot be rushed. It is a necessary part of the individuation process, but not one we can do on a self-care Sunday. All right, let's talk about the second Jungian archetype, and this is the Anima and Animus. Now, this is perhaps the most controversial of Jungian archetypes, and for a good reason. The Anima and Animus is what Jung called the contrasexual archetype. In his thinking, it was the animus, or inner masculine, within women, and the anima, or inner feminine, within men. This is one of Jung's most critiqued theories, obviously in part because it was born out of the most repressive gender ideologies of the 20th century. Jung was a product of his time, like everybody else. James Hillman, who was a depth psychologist and really did a lot of expansion through Jungian theories, actually argued that the anima was an archetype that didn't only belong to men, but belonged to everybody. And I think that this is exactly the point. It's not necessarily anima for men, animus for women. It's really about the inner feminine and inner masculine that we're all balancing all the time. I think the healthiest way to examine the anima and the animus is to look at how we relate to the divine masculine and divine feminine within us. These two energies are always in balance. They are always speaking to each other. And no matter how liberated and fluid we are with these ideas, the primordial concepts of masculine and feminine are so ingrained in our biology and our psychology that a lot of how we process things and understand our world, understand parts of ourselves, is through that binary. The inner binary of anima and animus, feminine and masculine, is an inner experience. It's really important. The inner experience is not always a reflection of the outer experience. It can be a lot more complicated than that. Can you see what's happening right now? What are you doing? Someone wants to start a fight. He's jealous because this is usually his spot. Pandora is the cute one, so I'm sorry. Didn't like that. Moving on. So the next two archetypes I'm going to talk about, I'm going to lump them together because they're really intertwined. Those are the ego and the persona. Mowgli. Maybe they'll make out. Yeah. Look at you babies. They're embarrassed. They don't want us to see it. So when we talk about the ego, we have to kind of distinguish the Jungian ego, the archetypal ego, from the way we kind of see the word today in spiritual terms. When we think about the ego today, we think of our self-absorption, our narcissism. But that's not really what we mean by ego. In the Jungian ego, we just mean the I. It is the archetype of self-identity. It is the archetype of conscious awareness, the dreamer who is within the dream. The persona is another Jungian archetype that most of us have probably heard of before. And this is the archetype of our outward face. You guys, they're gonna battle this out until they get the toasty spot. Mowgli, don't do anything bad, you. He's the mischievous one. Don't be fooled. We'll see how this ends. The persona is the face of the ego that is oriented outwards. And so it often actually becomes a mask, something behind which the ego hides that maybe makes more sense in the context of the society around it. So often we misidentify our ego with the persona. We think that the person that we present as in the world is really who we are. And that's a lot of that depth psychological work, is distinguishing between who we really are, who is the ego, and who is the person that we show up as. And now we've come to the final archetype, which is also the most ineffable and the most essential. And that is the archetype of the self. Jung described the self as the psychic totality of the individual. It is the mandala experience. It is the complex whole, the circle that contains everything. And it is also the nucleus at the center around which everything revolves. The self is both the center and the whole. And that is the point. Jung only used a capital S with this archetype because he really tended to see it as an experience of numinosity. Jung said that the self might equally be God in us. It is the goal of individuation. It is the experience of wholeness and at the same time oneness. We really meet the self when we get into those ecstatic moments of feeling like we kind of dissolve into the whole of the world. We really kind of melt into the collective unconscious. But it is also our experience of the personal soul of who we are that is always pulling us in. The self is something that we are all trying to get to, move to, get ever closer to, and it is absolutely the heart of Jungian psychology. It is the most powerful archetype of them all. So I'm sorry you did not get to see how this resolved because my camera died. It was loud and it was not good. So I hope this clarified for you what Jungian archetypes are and the foundations, how to approach them, what they really mean, how deep they really go, so that you're not caught so much in these typologies, these like tropey words that grab our attention and maybe really do connect to us, but are really just the surface experience, a lot of these deeper energies. Anyway, thanks for being here. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and go check out the Jung for Witches seminar series. Link is in the description. I will see you next time, my dears, and have a beautiful, meaningful day. We're just gonna no biting. Oh.